Okay. The term resilience usually refers to a person's ability to cope with, adapt to, and recover from difficulties, stress, or adversity in a way that supports their overall mental health, emotional, and physical well-being as well. Now, on this week's episode of a Happier Me podcast, we're going to discuss the topic of resilience with my co-host, as always, Dr. Manoj Krishna. Welcome, Manoj. Good to be talking with you
Thank you,
again.
Steve. Such an important subject, too.
I think absolutely, and I think I want to start with asking you, why is it being taught? Why is resilience being talked about so much, and what is resilience?
Yes. I asked someone yesterday, I said, can you ever remember a time in your life when it wasn't challenging? And this man was in his 70s. And he said he couldn't remember a time when their life wasn't challenging in some way. And if I ask myself the question, I can't remember a time when it wasn't challenging. Different challenges kept coming, you see. So resilience is about strengthening ourselves on the inside so that we can cope with the challenges on the outside. And that's, I suppose, a simple definition as we could get. It's not just about bouncing back, but learning, growing stronger, adapting. And this is a skill all of us need, every human being needs, because there will be no shortage of challenges coming our way, right?
Really interesting. I think if you'd have asked me that question, because I was thinking about this, not necessarily in relation to today's conversation, but thinking how much easier life seemed when I was a teenager. So this is this perfect view I have of my teenage years, and yet as I start to think about that now, I did have all kinds of challenges, kind of finding work, early relationships, all kinds of things that at that time to me were, you know, really awful things in my teenage young life. Little did I know what was to occur in my life as I got older. But I think it's probably right. We all face challenges of one kind or another, don't we, throughout
Yes. And
our
each
lives to a
time,
greater or lesser extent.
each of us thinks, or each generation thinks their challenges are unique, or the ones I'm facing. If I only solved those challenges on the outside, my life would be fine. But they don't realize that once you solve them, there'll be a new lot coming along, and then another one. So what we really need to do is build this conversation today is so important about resilience because it could help prevent suicide, self-harm, all sorts of problems, right?
I'm going to throw something in the mix here because it's been really interesting. The topic of resilience comes up quite a lot when I speak to people, particularly in the world of suicide prevention. And it's a word that often gets a bit of pushback, that people don't like the word resilient. I think because there's been a lot of talk, and this has been in the media and elsewhere, of children just need to be more resilient, or people just need to be more resilient. So I'm wondering if sometimes the way resilience is being used and communicated needs to be examined as well.
Yes.
What are your thoughts
Yes.
on that?
Yes, I can imagine that. So I think one needs to approach this with sensitivity. If we take the word resilience out and we just say, be stronger on the inside, nobody would argue with that,
Mm.
right? Nobody would argue that being stronger on the inside is a good thing. Equally, we are not saying that the challenges on the outside don't have to be dealt with. Sometimes people who are suffering naturally feel, well, somebody needs to sort this problem out for me. This problem on the outside, whether it's lack of money or whatever it might be, needs to be sorted. Somebody else's fault, somebody needs to sort it. But actually, the only person who can control what we are feeling and doing is ourselves. Right?
I think that's a really important point. I'm going to paraphrase very badly here, saying that often we may not be able to control the events that happen around us or to us or at us, maybe, or directed towards us. But the one thing we do have control over, and Viktor Frankl, of course, is somebody who is very much an expert in this through his experience and trauma of the concentration camps in the war. And the one thing we do have control over is how we respond and react to what does happen to us. So this, I suppose, is where we're going with resilience
Yes, and a
today.
good example, by the way, this is not an easy realization for people to come to because the way our mind is wired, we automatically assume the external trigger is responsible for how we are feeling. But when we slow it down and see really clearly, it's not the traffic jam, it's how our mind's reacting to the traffic jam that's creating our stress, right? The emotional distress. It doesn't mean the challenge doesn't have to be dealt with. But if you're not distressed, you can deal with it in a much calmer way, more intelligent way, with more choices, and so on. So, this realization that I have agency over how I feel and how I respond is resilience, I guess, right?
I think the traffic jam analogy is really interesting. I once heard somebody left a post or a comment, I think, on Facebook that I saw, might be a year or two ago. But he said, I'm stuck in a traffic jam," and somebody responded and said, "Well, you are the traffic." Uh, you know, you kind of you realize your part in that. I
You're part
think
of
is
that.
is
Yes.
really interesting, isn't it?
Yes. Yes.
So look, challenges will keep coming. Obviously, from what you're saying, it's that we can't control that necessarily, but it's really how we respond and deal with that, and that we're better prepared to deal with the
Mm.
storms that are coming. And I suppose, I've seen examples, I'm sure you have, Manoj, of people that have had some pretty terrible things happen to them. We have our own experience of losing Jordan to suicide, and we arguably have shown resilience by the way that we've come through that and the work we're doing now. And I can think of many situations, but two that did very much come to mind because they're recent events in terms of my knowledge of them, at least, or the fact I'm connected with the people in question. But very recently we had the announcement of the Royal Foundation for the Prince and Princess of Wales having launched their new suicide prevention network. And many people have seen Prince William meeting with Rhiannon Mannings, the lady who founded the charity To Wish, to provide support really for young people under the age of 25 who've been impacted by sudden death. Now, her story is one of losing her young son suddenly to an illness, and just a matter of 5 days later, her husband took his own life as a result. And you think, wow, just what level of
How
resilience do
sad
you
is
have
that?
to have there? But equally, somebody I know really well, a lady called Angela Allen, she runs a charity called Bags for Strife. And that provides support to people that have been immediately bereaved by suicide. And she, in 2019, lost her 23-year-old daughter, Katrina, to suicide. And just 8 months later, Katrina's stepdad and Angela's partner also took his own life. And, when you read stories like these, and then they're not unique,
No.
sadly, you think, how on earth do you come through that? But people do. So I think, again, this is why this conversation is so important, because part of my mindset now is, wow, if people like that can come through, then there is an opportunity for us all to deal with whatever comes in our life and come through that,
Yes.
um, as well. So what happens in our minds then, Manoj, when we're faced with any kind of adversity? And maybe you have some experiences as well, by the way.
Yes. So I've got a couple of stories to share, but they all point to one thing, Steve, that we don't know how our mind will respond or react to the storms of life until they arrive.
Mm.
Nobody thinks it's going to be them. Nobody ever who takes their own life thinks it could ever happen to me one day.
Oh, I can testify to that. Mm.
Exactly right. So I've got a couple of examples. I'm talking in a school to some sixth formers about mental well-being, and a girl gets up and runs out of the class. And the teacher later says, She split up with her boyfriend a year before, and he took and she then he took his own life because he couldn't cope with that. And then my anesthetist I used to work with as a surgeon for a long time, he had a complaint against him which was being investigated, and he was suspended from work while it was being investigated, which is normal practice, by the way. And
Mm.
he couldn't cope. He had left three children, small children behind. So there are many, many stories. And what we're all this points to is that everybody listening to this, and if you can share this with everybody you know, needs to invest in their resilience and their mental well-being today, because you don't know how your mind will react to the storms of life tomorrow. So this is why our conversation is so important.
Like, but a lot of people would probably potentially if you just feel powerless in situations sometimes. So how do they get out of that kind of loop of negative thinking, if you like, and
Okay.
and be able to build themselves up again?
I think the first step, I think when there's a problem, say when an engine car breaks down, you have to study the engine, right? What's going on? So similarly, when we're distressed emotionally, we have to study our own mind and just try and figure out what's going on. And once you understand that, then it becomes easier. So the first thing to realize is our mind is an automatic reaction machine. We have no control over that reaction. There's a challenge on the outside, there's an instant reaction. Now, the severity of that reaction depends on our past history of how much trauma we're carrying, how much stress we're carrying already. So if you have suffered all your life, then a small trigger will create a very huge response, as you know. Um, Whereas if you've been happy and emotionally stable and resilient, then you can deal with those challenges. So each person is different. And of course, the third thing the mind does is it naturally blames out people on the outside for all our circumstances, for how we're feeling, which is just normal. There's nothing wrong with that. But it's not true because the trigger is on the outside, but the automatic reaction, which we don't see, is on the inside,
Mm.
right? And as you say, we feel powerless. And this creates the loop of negative thinking and the fear of the future, and it traps us. And we
Okay.
think there's no escape, you see.
So that's a really useful understanding of what happens. I think
What
that'd be useful for
happens?
anyone listening.
Yes,
But how can that understanding then help us develop our own resilience?
yes. So, okay, let's break it down one by one because there's lots of different things here. So the first thing is, I think we all need to learn some breathing and calming techniques, which can help us to regulate our emotions. Because if you practice a breathing exercise, and a simple one is breathe into a count of 4 and breathe out slowly to a count of 6, and anyone can practice this. What it does is it activates something called the parasympathetic nervous system. It slows the heart rate, calms our mind, slows the breathing, and it just creates that pause so that your intelligence can step in and say, hey, what's the right thing to do here, rather than react automatically. It gives you agency. So I think that's the first thing. You can also practice some tapping exercises. A simple one is just on your shoulders like that, or over your heart, or a soothing exercise like this. It's called EFT. And I think the key step to resilience is ownership. And that's the hardest step, isn't it, Steve? How do you take ownership of how you're feeling as something that's coming from your own mind? Yes, the trigger might be on the outside, but unless I take ownership, I can't do anything about it.
That's really important. I'm just going to come back to those first 2 points you made there because there might be people listening to this going, "Oh, really breathing and tapping, what that's all about." But I've had, a couple of experiences just to share of this. First of all, um, an organization we know really well, Ripple Suicide Prevention, they provide what's known as a browser interrupter. So if someone is searching for means of suicide via the web, and Ripple Suicide Prevention's app is on their browser or on their phone, immediately what comes up are some help solutions. It interrupts the browser. But the first thing that happens is a countdown and breathing exercises
Yes.
just to calm the person down. The second point was at the end of a conference I was speaking at just a few weeks ago around suicide, the topic. It was a very inspiring conference, but also very stressful, a lot of the topics. And a lady came on and demonstrated to us how to do from head to toe body tapping. And it was, well, I think we all felt a little, some of us felt a little silly
Mm.
doing it initially, but there was this sense afterwards of kind of a release and a calmness as we went from the head to the arms and the legs and back up again. So, look, these are proven techniques,
Yes,
aren't
yes,
they? They're
and
not
practical,
just,
Steve, because what it's
yeah,
doing is it's taking you out of your head and
right.
connecting you with your body, you know? And the body is present in the present, whereas our thoughts are, of course, in the future and the past and, all over the place, right? So, and I've been at this now for 10 years, and all the people who have turned their lives around emotionally, with their mental health and dealt with their challenges, if you ask them, what's the number one most important thing that you did that helped you turn the corner? And it's taking ownership.
Yeah.
Without that, your mind convinces you that you're a victim of your circumstances. You can't do anything. You have no agency. Someone else has to change for you to feel better. And then you get trapped there. So the first step, though it's really hard, is to take ownership. What do you think about that?
Yeah, well, I was going to say, rather than just going to someone and saying, well, you need to sort yourself out and take ownership. Interesting that you said it's really hard to do that. So how do you take ownership? Are there some practical steps that you can
Just think of
undertake?
the traffic jam. Think of the traffic jam and realize there's a trigger on the outside, but there's an automatic reaction on the inside that's creating your distress because the person next to you in the traffic jam may not be distressed at all. It's not wrong. You're not to blame yourself for it. But just to realize that because it's happening, it's a reaction from your mind that's creating the distress. You can now begin a journey, and we're going to help you with that, to train your own mind so that you
I,
can
I
respond better.
I think it's really important. I once heard someone say in these situations you need to become curious and you need to ask a question.
Yeah.
And I can see what you're saying, and maybe a really good question to ask at that moment in the traffic jam when you're starting to get wound up or whatever it might be, is to say, what is it that might be causing me to feel
Yes.
this
Yes.
external to myself? Just to stop for a moment and think about what is it that's causing me to feel this way? Is it that I'm going to be late? Is it, a whole list of things it might be? And I suppose if you start to ask that question and further questions, then you can come up with solutions and answers to say, okay, well, I'll phone work and let them know I'm going to be late.
Yes.
That might be one solution rather than just sitting here getting angry
Yes.
and frustrated. So no, I think I get that. That's a really important
Or it could be
point.
that if there's something on the outside that can't change, then the answer to stress lies in acceptance. Okay? Acceptance dissolves stress. Acceptance dissolves anxiety. I've lost my job. I accept, my stress disappears. I've lost my son. I accept, my stress disappears. Do you know what I mean? So as soon as I can accept things as they are, which I cannot change, my stress
I
ends.
think this is really important, Manoj, because I was speaking to somebody recently who has, lost their son, and the most devastating thing, as I know from experience, and what was really interesting because this person, a female, could, because she was so close to her son, have really gone to the depths of despair, and she has in the past. But she told me the other day, she said, and a lot of that has to do with faith, a faith that she has, and not everybody has a spiritual faith. I understand that. But what she said to me, and she used the exact word, was she said, I've accepted that Jordan is in a better place now, or the person I've now given that away. It's like it is a family member, but she said I've accepted that Jordan is in, a better place now, and it was that acceptance that is allowing her to move forward still in life. So I think that's a really valid point you raise.
Oh, I've got another great story about acceptance. So the I still do some medical work, and the other day, a few months ago, I met a man in his 60s who's paralyzed from the neck down, accident, etc. Very little function in his hands and legs. And he and his partner were going to get married next year. And they were having this nice, chirpy conversation. You wouldn't think that this man has got no function in his arms and legs and is completely
Yeah.
dependent. So I asked him, I said, what's the secret of your, good humor, good mood? Why aren't you down in the dumps? And he said, I've accepted things as they are. It's so powerful, Steve, just
Oh,
to
it is.
ask yourself the
It's
question, can I accept things as they are? Not saying it's
and
possible
that's
every time, right?
yeah. I suppose the other question is, will I get through this as well? Is another
Yes.
question that's likely to come up, isn't it? One thing I wanted to ask you, we hear a lot of, and increasingly I hear this from people talking about the importance of gratitude,
Yes.
um, and even potentially being grateful for adversity. So I wonder what your thoughts are on
Yes, so
on that. Sounds a
interesting.
strange
So
thing to
my
say,
son
doesn't it?
called me the other day and he was having some challenges. And I told him exactly this. I said, be grateful because these challenges are going to make you stronger. Right? So
And we're
adversity
told
is
that as children. We're told that as children, aren't we? I don't think we always believe that.
no, no,
Don't
but
worry,
it's
it'll make
true.
make you
If
stronger.
you can get through a challenge and come out the other end, you're going to be so much more confident in your ability to deal with challenges. And
Mm.
little children get it. So when I was in a school, I was doing some work in schools, and I said, what are the benefits of failing an exam? I just asked this question. There was really stunned silence. Then after 5 minutes of me just sitting there and waiting, I said, you've got the answer already in you. Come on, find it. This boy piped up and said, it's going to make me stronger. See, so
And it's
adversity
true. No,
can help us
it
build our resilience. Resilience is built by dealing with adversity, right? In small ways.
Yeah, and I agree. And again, I can talk from very personal experience. There, it gives me a very different attitude and level of acceptance of other things that once upon a time might have upset me or caused me great anxiety. They do so at a much lower level now. I think because of what we've gone through so far. Um, I liked a quote I think you shared with me actually in preparation from today, which is "Every storm runs out of rain."
Yes, yes.
I thought that was a wonderful quote there. What did you mean by that,
Well,
really?
it's actually from Maya Angelou, the great American writer and activist. And I love that because it means that no matter what you're going through right now, it will pass. You may think the storm is never going to pass, but all storms do. People have got through the ravages of concentration camps, starvation in Ireland, refugees, and built their lives again. And just read the stories to inspire you of the adversity humans have faced and come through, the other end.
Yeah.
I was reading about St. John of the Cross and how he was locked in a cellar, in a cupboard actually, for months and months and tortured, and how he came through that. You see, with his faith intact, and then went on to be so inspirational as a spiritual leader. One more
Yeah.
thing, Steve, is that when we're faced with adversity, our mind zooms into the problem and we lose perspective. So I
Mm.
failed an exam, my whole life is a failure, that kind of thinking. And once you zoom out consciously and say, hey, what do I still have to be grateful for? You mentioned the word gratitude.
Mm.
There's so much. And if you got nothing else, there's your breath. Because if you can't breathe, you can't live. So there's so much in life to be grateful for, which our mind takes for granted, right?
And again, these kind of exercises, such as gratitude, are real practical things we can do. I mean, literally, sit down and write out. Okay, this seems like the worst day ever, but what is good about my life? And so many people I know who practice gratitude daily. People that surprise me, you wouldn't expect to necessarily do that, are finding that makes a huge difference to their days, to be able to look at the end of the day or the beginning of the day, no matter how they're feeling, and saying, what can I be grateful for today, and what am I grateful for that has happened today, when they get to the end of the day. And that consistent conditioning, almost, of looking for things to be grateful for, I suppose that's going to strengthen resilience to a
Absolutely.
degree
And
as
it
well.
kind of leads nicely into the last point about building resilience, which is to train your mind to look at things positively. And you have to do that consciously because our mind is always looking for threats, right? And it's from the caveman days, like we're always going to be attacked by somebody or the other. So, but in the modern era, it doesn't work because we focus on the negative. Our mind tends to focus on the negative. And in every situation, there's a more positive way of looking at things and to train our mind to do that. So important as a skill.
I've got a question before we move on, because I know there's something you want to just kind of share with us, specifically visually, for those watching on YouTube. But it's a thought I've been having a lot. Do you think, as a society, we've become less resilient? What I mean by that is, we too many people are kind of just giving up because the weather's bad, or they've had a bit of bad news or whatever, or are we being faced with more challenges than we have done before in our lifetimes? I'm just wondering if, as a society, we're not as resilient as we once were, and I just wondered if you had any thoughts on that.
Very difficult to answer um, with any kind of certainty. But I would say social media has had a huge impact because
Mm,
in the past, when you were growing up, there was none of all that. You just had your few friends and that was it. But
mm,
now all the traumas of the world get funneled into the news, which gets
mm.
funneled in, and 24/7 you're used. Something's happening 10,000 miles away, but it's for you, it's like happening on your doorstep. So, we
Yeah,
become so much more negative news is coming our way. And every attack and murder that happens in the country leaves you a little bit more frightened of your own, what's going to happen to you, right? So I think, and also around us, there's perhaps more negativity, you think? People, I mean, how often in the media or in the news do you get people saying, "Oh, what a wonderful life do we have? What a wonderful world we live in. How grateful am I? I put the tap on the other day and I got drinking water from it." I said, "Oh my golly goodness, how amazing is that?"
it's
Right?
magic. It's magic. I know it's really important. I heard via a second party about a conversation with a journalist recently, who said, in terms of the news media, once upon a time, the balance when they produced the news on television was that they would go for 80% bad news and trauma and world events, but made sure that they had 20% good news stories. These days, the directors and producers of these programs are looking to squeeze in about 2% good news,
Really? And
98%
you
of
heard
what
that
they've
from a
been instructed
journalist.
to share. Yeah, yeah, it's quite incredible. So I think what you're saying here then is, and I do agree with the comments about the media, about social media. We can't always control some of the external events that happen to us, but there are a lot we can. We can kind of consume less social media. We can scroll less. We can not watch the news as frequently. There are some real practical, proactive things we can do here, aren't there?
And in every situation, ask yourself, hey, how can I look at this more positively? How can I look at
Mm,
this person more positively? How can I look at my circumstances? How can look at the world? And then you notice the beauty in the world, the beauty in people. And if you look for it, you'll find it. You see what I mean? You'll find what you're looking for, Steve.
absolutely. Now, look, without having to travel to Egypt, I believe you got a pyramid too.
I wanted to
show us.
share a way of understanding our own mind and finding that sense of peace in ourselves. And it's the work that's at the heart of the HappierMe project. And we've created a visual to help people understand. So
Okay.
let me just share that if I may. Okay. So this is to understand our own mind. Imagine there's a pyramid with 5 layers. And layers 1 and 2 are what we're aware of, and 3, 4, and 5 are things that are hidden from our own understanding and awareness. So layer 1 is what's happening in the world outside. So say I fail an exam or an interview, or somebody I love leaves me, or the traffic jam, any of those challenges that you mentioned, or somebody dies. Layer 2 is where we feel our thoughts and emotions. So our mind reacts. I feel the pain of stress, disappointment. I might feel my whole life is a failure, or nobody's ever going to love me again if someone I love leaves me, or I'll never get another job, and so on, right? Or my life is going to be ruined. So that's how our mind reacts. And it's an automatic reaction. And we live in layers 1 and 2, what's happening outside and what happens inside. We react. What we want to show is that deeper down, once you're curious, as you mentioned, and you ask, hey, what's going on in my mind to make me feel this way? You realize underneath is your fear of the future or our conditioning, all our past trauma is accumulated and making us react in a particular way. Or we're worried what other people are going to think about us. Or our mind is zooming in, as we said. So all these things are happening just beyond our awareness. So that when we wake up to that, we can then have more control, if you like, over what happens in layer 2 and how we're reacting. The next layer is the I that gets hurt and feels afraid and feels lonely and worried what others will say and, all of that. And, if there's no I, there's no suffering, right? If there's no Manoj, there's no end of stress. So we think that the answer to all our problems lies outside in fixing the outside. But
Mm.
actually, within us all, deeper down, is this sense of peace. And it comes from staying with the feeling we have without thinking. It's called meeting it without language. Because what happens when you do that and remain really still, it's like saying, experiencing the sensation of hunger without calling it hunger, for example. So
Hmm.
if you can stay with that emotional pain without naming it, it just melts away, it dissolves. And the reason is because the mind becomes really quiet. And when the mind becomes quiet, the sense of I also dissolves. See? So there's no more suffering. So it's a tool. It's not something that can happen instantly, but it's a way in which we can meet our challenges in a different way by staying with or being with the sensation as it rises, finding the real reasons why we're suffering, which may be on the inside, may not be on the outside. Of course, someone's hitting you on the head with a stick, it's a different matter.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
but but and then to if we can all find this sense of peace in ourselves and anchor ourselves in that peace, then whatever happens on the outside, we're fine. We can cope. And this is not something I've invented, by the way. For thousands of years, people have said the same thing. We're just finding a different way to express it.
Yeah. And look, for anyone watching on YouTube, you can see the pyramid here, and that was a really useful explanation. But I think it would also come across really well via the audio recording of this as well, Manoj. So thank you for sharing that. Um, what are some of the myths do you think there are around resilience? Views that people have that need to be dispelled and got rid of.
Yeah, that you've got to be strong, and strong people don't suffer, or you're weak if you're suffering, or there's no strong or weak. We're the same human being. It's okay to feel
Yeah,
bad. It's
yeah,
okay, but it's all about not about strength, it's about adapting and being
yeah.
intelligent and wise and responding in that way. Because strong could just mean you're bottling things up, and bottling things up, as you know, and doesn't end well, right? It explodes one day,
No, no,
you know,
definitely.
you know.
And look at another myth is I hear that you're either born resilient or you're not. I hear that
Yes, that's
sometimes
not
as well.
true either. Each of us can train our mind to be more resilient. So the key to take away for everyone listening is you can train your mind.
I suppose in much the same way as the body, that if we
Yes,
exercise, we go to the gym, we
yes,
strengthen our muscles and our body and our cardiovascular system to become more resilient to
yes,
ill
yes,
health, and the mind is the same in that respect.
absolutely.
For most people, unless there is a serious biological mental health issue there, of course. Um, what other things can help with resilience?
I think relationships are so important. Building and investing in your relationships today so that they provide the safety net when you fall tomorrow.
Absolutely. And we've covered that relationships, of
We
course, in a
have covered
previous
that and the
previous
importance of
podcast as well.
investing in our
Yeah,
relationships today and not to be afraid of reaching out and asking for help. It's not a sign of
yeah,
weakness, it's a sign of your own humanity.
absolutely. And I suppose some of the fundamental hygiene factors, such as good sleep and
Yes.
food and exercise that I mentioned, and water, keeping hydrated, all important
And
things as
stay
well.
away from alcohol. When you're stressed, the last thing you need is alcohol because it's going to reduce your ability to deal with your challenges.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we know one of the challenges with alcohol is that it can lower inhibitions, and particularly for someone who's really depressed or struggling with their mental health, and maybe even having thoughts of suicide, we know that it's one of the potential volitional factors that can lead to somebody acting on those thoughts as well. So I think that's a really, really good bit of advice. Um, that we every podcast, one of the things we really like to do is to dip into this amazing app that you've developed called HappierMe, and I'm fairly certain that what we've been discussing today, that for anyone who has the app at the moment, will be able to find this. But anyone not familiar with it, if you're able to give us a quick tour of just how HappierMe can help in terms of having our audience feel a bit more resilient and
Yes.
stronger.
Okay. So we've been curating content in this for many years, and experts from around the world have contributed their content. We've recently had approval from Orca, which is like a healthcare validation agency, if you like. They validate apps. So I'm just going to show you around the app. It's on your phone, but it's also on your desktop. It's called Happier Me. And maybe the first bit everyone needs is the feel better now. And if you look at, say, stress, the first thing we'll offer is, again, the breathing exercise, a piece of sound, music, a meditation, a short video, and a long video, and a podcast. All of these are designed to help you feel better in the short term. And then we'll take you deeper to explore the subject of stress in more detail and help you understand that you can respond to stress. When I use the word stress, I mean adversity in all its forms, in 14 different ways, which you didn't think you could before. And it's just giving each person agency to be stronger on the inside so they can deal with their challenges. And if you come back to the home page, you'll see there are 10 broad topics we have, including work, mental well-being, relationships, loss for those dealing with it, addiction, how to manage our emotions. There's a new section for parents and a section on developing your self-awareness. In the menu on the top right is our app for teenagers. So Happier Me has sections for teenagers, parents, and adults, so can support the entire family to manage their own mental well-being, strengthen their relationships, and avoid addiction, because there's a whole section on addiction there as well. So I think that's a quick introduction,
Yeah, no,
Steve.
no, thank you. And look, for anyone listening, we've known each other for a while. Manoj, the thing, oh well, the Jordan Legacy's got some kind of special deal with the app. We are really enthusiastic about what you're developing it and have developed at HappierMe because for me, it is a real practical tool that not only gives immediate solutions to problems, but allows you to dig deeper and understand why those issues are occurring. And by understanding those and getting some of your curiosity answered and some of your questions answered, you can better manage your mental health and your well-being. So I think it's really important that people get an opportunity, and there's a free trial with the
There's
app
a free trial.
as well.
Yes, and it's
Yeah,
so
so
modestly
this,
priced that, less than two coffees a month.
yeah,
It's affordable for really everyone. But our
absolutely.
mission is to help people lead happier lives, reduce suffering, help make the world better. And I know that you and I share that feeling, Steve.
Very, very much so. So, look, as always, Manoj, thank you for that. A real interesting topic. I'm sure our listeners are going to enjoy that. And look, for anyone listening or watching via YouTube to the podcast, please leave your comments on those social channels and through the other channels that we'll be sharing this episode with. That'll be up on the Jordan Legacy website now, and probably how you've accessed it right now, in fact. So, if you'd like details of how to access the Happier Me app, you'll also find that on the Jordan Legacy website, along with other support organizations as well. Or you can go directly to the happierme.app website and take that free trial as well. So, Manoj, thank you as always. Really important information we've shared. Hopefully, as a result, people will be able to deal with some of those challenges, including traffic jams that they might be stuck in whilst they're listening to this podcast.
Steve, thank
Who
you.
knows?
Such a pleasure. And we always explore some wonderful topics and find new ways of looking at things. Thank you.
Thank you, Manoj. Take care.